there's so much beauty and so much power and strength in 12-step programs. And I think there are also some old ideas and some rigidity, for sure, that prevents them from becoming even more effective. That's just how I feel. And I can tell you that the 12 steps, the doctrine, and the love of the people that helped me saved my life and changed my life forever. And so I can say, yes, it saved and changed my life, and it could be even better. And that's why Recovery 2.0, and that's why you're doing the work you're doing, and that's why we're asking the questions that we're asking.
So grateful to be here. So I was very much like Tommy. I needed to have it drilled into my head. When I entered the rooms, I was desperate enough that I was willing to go to any lengths to find recovery. I figured if I would do that for my addiction, I need to do that for my recovery. No questions. I came defensive, Tommy, just like yourself. I had all the answers. I knew my story. I thought I was terminally unique, all the things. However, after 7 years of being in 12-step recovery and a primary addiction treatment center, I really was very unwell. I was suicidal. I hated myself so much I couldn't look at myself in the mirror. I was probably depressed, anxious, and not treated in any way. And I was white knuckling through life. And that's when I actually found Master Kip, and you were my first Kundalini yoga practice in Toronto, and on a very rare occasion. And that night, something hit me, and I thought, oh my God, like I am as high as a kite. So I love being high. I just needed to find healthier ways of doing it. So that was the beginning of my journey of my own self-inquiry. And I thought, after that period of time, I started relapsing because of my depression, untreated illness, mental illness. And I really didn't know what to do, but I found this other way, and I knew there had to be another answer, which led to Recovery 2.0 and different modalities. And then I went on this quest, this deep dive of all these modalities. I became trained in just about anything and everything. And for me, what had happened was I became a student of everything, but I'm also willing to do the work. I'm still willing to go to any length, no matter what. But I too have met some real stigma within the rooms. And so that was really hurting me because I already had terribly low self-esteem. I didn't need someone telling me I was doing it wrong if I'm having a relapse. I needed compassion. I needed to be held. I needed to be supported. And none of that happened for me until I eventually became clinically trained and found therapeutic supportive communities where somatic experience in nervous system regulation, attachment theory, polyvagal, like I know all that and I teach that now. And the reason I add that is it's kind of challenging for me with 12-step because there's a part of it that I wouldn't have got well without it. I know that for a fact. But there's a part of it that failed me so greatly because of the fact that it really re-stigmatized a lot of the trauma I was having because I have a history of trauma, and not just minor trauma, but complex trauma from a very young age. So my question to you is, how ready with the newer emergent modalities that we see, and there's alternate communities, and there's a change in sobriety landscape versus, heavy drinking still, but how ready you think is 12-step or the treatment communities ready for these newer emergent, modalities like neuroscience, like attachment theory, like all the things I'm just talking about, because I think that is where the secret sauce is to take us to the next level to deal with our humanity problem, which is returning to the essence of who we really are.
Jeanne, thank you so much for this inquiry. It is, there's a lot to unpack here.
For sure.
So I love it. I love it. So let's go piece by piece. First, a word on 12-step programs. There's the 12 steps, which is a doctrine. The written word. Every spiritual path and every religious path have a doctrine. It's a teaching. And around the doctrine, a community will form. The doctrine in its purest form has truth in it. Otherwise, it's not a true path. But in this case, the 12 steps, let's just call it the 12 steps themselves a true path in the sense that there's truth in there. And the question is how can we get at it? How can we mine it for what it is, not make it into something that it isn't, approach it appropriately, learn and grow and move towards freedom, as we've spoken about today. So the doctrine of the 12 steps, in my opinion, in my direct experience, and the direct experience of millions of other people, the doctrine itself is legit. It's got truth in there as a spiritual doctrine whose purpose is, its stated purpose is to bring about a psychic change in the person who engages with it and to build a relationship with a power greater than oneself. Those are the two stated purposes of the doctrine of the 12 steps. When I say to people, who are in recovery, have you done the 12 steps? Often they'll say, yes, but it wasn't for me. And I'll say, okay, tell me about your experience. They'll say, well, I went to a meeting every day for 90 days and, had a sponsor and met lots of people and, got sober for that period of time. But, my life didn't really change. And later on, I relapsed. And I say, well, tell me your experience with the steps. And they'll say, well, I just did. And I'm like, oh, you're confusing 12-step fellowship, the community, with the actual doctrine of doing the work of the 12 steps, which requires reading and writing and conversing and a lot of contemplation. And there's some prayer in there. And there's all kinds of work that one has to do to actually do the 12 steps. So that person will say, well, in their mind, they've done the 12 steps because they went to meetings. And I'm trying to explain, like, wow, you had a sponsor even, but you never did the work. You didn't develop a relationship with the doctrine itself. What that means exactly is that person had an experience which was largely social and dictated by the personalities and the belief systems of the people that person came in contact with at 12-step meetings. If those people were the brightest, most loving, most compassionate, most wise, most unbelievable people you've ever met in your life, that person could report to you, I had the most incredible experience with the 12 steps. But of course, he still or she would not have had an experience with the 12 steps at all because they never actually engaged with the doctrine. They're basing their opinion, their entire experience of 12-step recovery on what took place socially while they were in those rooms or outside of those rooms with people that they met in those rooms. Countless stories of women who met a guy in the rooms. Lo and behold, they ended up hooking up and it didn't go well. And they had a sour feeling about the 12 steps. 12 steps really didn't work out for those people because for them, it was about social, in this case, sexual, romantic, and it had everything to do with sort of the machinations of being a human being, but it had nothing to do with spiritual development, emotional maturity, personal transformation, and self-help. So the thing I want to make sure that people understand about 12-step programs is actually there are very few people that make complaint about the doctrine itself, other than those people who have trouble with the language, which is an antiquated language dating back 85 years, which has religious undertones to it. So anybody coming with religious prejudice may also have a problem with the language, but not with the spirit of the doctrine itself. Because I could say to someone who says, well, the 12-step doctrine, really not for me. And I could say, well, what didn't you like about it? Was it the suggestion of rigorous honesty? To complete that point, your inquiry has to do with shifting landscapes of recovery, learning new modalities of healing, and will 12-step programs adjust themselves to become better, essentially? So I just wanted to start with the 12 steps as they are not, they're not meant to do anything more than the two things that I spoke of earlier. The reason I desired to speak and have spoken rather prolifically about the 12 steps and the difference between fellowship and doctrine is because I want people to understand that there's a genius and a magic there. And far from perfect is this society because it's filled with human beings and all of us are on our path of, let's just say we're all works in progress. So there's many challenges and one's success with people in the program will depend upon which people you happen to run into. Your approach to the 12 steps to the doctrine will depend upon your sponsor and the group of people that you get in with. It's a beautiful system, and it's a system that also can bring up challenge for people, depending on whom you're around and what your approach is, and also depending upon your attitude when you arrive there and your ability to be truly willing. But I did want to say that there is this gorgeous transformational thing that is there and it works. Now, is it everything? Of course not. Does it achieve, all of the things we wish it would? No, of course not. Does it give us the success rates that we of people reaching not just abstinence but true freedom in recovery? No, we know that we need to do better. And I think that's where this inquiry is coming from. We know we need to do better. And we've learned so much in this day and age about psychology. We've learned about the pros and the cons of psychiatry. We've learned about medicine and science. We've learned about spirituality. We've learned so much about trauma. And we are now working on all of these different modalities to address in a more effective and more compassionate way the variety of challenges that people experience when they come to addictive behaviors in the first place. And now we're working on addressing those. Here's what I'm concerned about. The United States of America has made a decision. The decision, I'm not 100% sure where it originated. It could have originated at the level of government and power in our country. It may have originated at the level of the insurance industry. It may have originated in medicine and the medical industry. It may have originated in the pharmaceutical industry. Wherever it originated, this idea, I'm deeply concerned about it. And the idea is this. We have now decided that the central piece of our approach to addiction is going to be pharmacology. That's how we treat addiction primarily, far and wide, in the treatment centers in the United States of America today. And that if you arrive there as a severe alcoholic, an opiate addict of any kind, it's going to be highly recommended to you that you get on one class of drugs or another, not just to help you through your detoxification, your physical detoxification, but long-term. It's not a black and white issue. I'm not anti-medication, but I just think that to center your approach to the problem of addiction as being, we're going to treat drug addiction with drugs, I think it's an incredible mistake, unbelievable mistake. And I think that it overlooks a lot of the modalities that Jeanne was bringing up. I don't think it gives enough of an opportunity for people to heal. I think we need a longer window of healing. I don't think 28 days in treatment, much less 14 days is enough time for us to address the mental and psychological, social, and environmental issues of addiction. This takes time. It has to be worked out over time. So the move in our country is not about embracing these new modalities that you're bringing up. I do not believe we're embracing, somatic healing the way it should be embraced. I don't believe that we're looking at dietary regimen and protocols to change one's diet, the importance of the gut biome and how critically important that is in our emotional regulation. I don't think we are adopting meditation in the way that we should. And don't get me wrong, it's not all bad. There are many, many smart, wise, experienced people doing great work in the field of recovery, of course. But by and large, the decision has been made. And so when you show up at treatment, the chances are you're going to be put on drugs. And if you're not kept on drugs in treatment, the chances are that the insurance company, if you're there on the insurance company's dime, they're going to say this is a patient that could be handled at a lesser level of care. If they don't need to be on drugs, then we don't need to pay for them being in treatment. Now, that means that if I go to treatment today and they say, well, we want to put you on drugs for your opiate addiction, and I say, I'd rather you not do that. I know I'm going to go through a pretty gnarly detox period, but I want to go through it and I want to get sober. Can you help me? The answer to a great extent is we don't recommend that. Now, I'm going to use some French here on the podcast. I don't know if they have to beep it out, but I think that's fucked up severely. I think that's a real problem. And so you, Jeanne, you bring up all these new modalities psychologically and somatically and in the body. And is our world ready for that at the level of treating addiction? Maybe in small pockets. Maybe when somebody gets to come to your office and gets to come to your practice or gets to come to Recovery 2.0, they get turned on to these things. But by and large, I think, the 12-step programs, they have these guidelines, very specific guidelines about pretty much keeping things the way they are. They're not a program that has been built for transforming itself. And I think this is one of the reasons why it's so important to take the very best of what works in 12-step programs, and for us outside of those programs to iterate on that and innovate on that. I'll give you another example. I always thought there should be guidelines for sponsors and workshops where people can become better and better sponsors and learn more and more about addiction and recovery. Wouldn't it be great if we were actively creating better and better sponsors to sponsor people more effectively? It seems like such an obvious idea. But to my knowledge, that doesn't exist. I think there's so much beauty and so much power and strength in 12-step programs. And I think there are also some old ideas and some rigidity, for sure, that prevents them from becoming even more effective. That's just how I feel. And I can tell you that the 12 steps, the doctrine, and the love of the people that helped me saved my life and changed my life forever. And so I can say, yes, it saved and changed my life, and it could be even better. And that's why Recovery 2.0, and that's why you're doing the work you're doing, and that's why we're asking the questions that we're asking. Because at the end of the day, I really believe in people, actually. I believe people want people to stop suffering. I do, generally speaking. And I think at the individual level, people would like to do better. But I think we find ourselves stuck in these systems with power structures that it's really difficult to break out of. And I think that's what's happening here. Politicians need to appear effective. They need to appear like they're doing something about a very big problem. And these are the ways that they've decided to appear that way. The FDA, Food and Drug Administration, needs to appear like it's, got the interests of people highest. It's a very important agency. And yet they've made such glaring mistakes when it comes to drugs and addiction that it's just, you can't even imagine that somebody with a consciousness would be making those decisions. And other agencies that you can't help but call into question, the CDC and agencies that have just time and time again step on their own foot and put out information that later on we learn was exaggerated or not true, or and these are important agencies. They also put out good information. It's just really hard to get through. So I think we have these systems set up that individuals who are truly well-meaning get stuck in these systems and don't know what to do. And they just have to sort of, get pulled down the river with everybody else. So what are your thoughts on this? I want to hear from you.
Thank you very much for bringing that up. So definitely it's a systemic issue. I agree with you. I'm mortified that that is how we're treating addiction with pharmacology, because it speaks to, I hate to say it, but it's a corrupt way, because it's not an optimal way of it keeps people in the system over and over again. It's not the greatest utilization of healthcare dollars, and it's an expensive, like I know for a fact the US has the highest utilization in healthcare, and they utilize the highest gross domestic product in healthcare dollars, and they don't rate as the highest in health. So that in itself speaks volumes. It is systemic. You know, you've got justice, you've got education, you've got healthcare, you've got all these systemic issues, and you've got the FDA, as you said, and the Food and Drug. I know for a fact they bought off cereal companies in the day. So sugar, you talk about your first addiction always being sugar, as I definitely can attest to. So we're working against these bureaucratic systems that aren't true. And I see this in Canada now, as a young girl of 30 who came to me for cocaine, was whipped off to someone else, and is now on Suboxone. Really? Come on. Anyway, so what do I think? In terms of the doctrine, I love the doctrine of AA. It really is something I bought into. The spirituality, that was my salvation. Thank God, I have a very strong spiritual salvation, because I don't think I would have made it any other way. That is what has kept me somewhat alive and sane. And I love that, because it takes the chaos out of my life when life feels really unmanageable at times. So I have no problem with that. What I did have problems was that I was really a very devout student and devoted to my process of recovery. And there was a time after 7 years, it really did fail me in a way, because I felt like I was being, justified or not, re-stigmatized in that. And so that's when I found you. And thank God there was another way, because I fell in love with Kundalini immediately. It was something that is, to this day, I have a sadhana practice. To this day, this is what I teach my clients. It is absolutely imperative to have a daily practice, some sort, breath work, all of those things. Because what I found, as I said before, is I like feeling good. Why wouldn't you want to feel good? I know what it was like to off myself. I almost wanted to do that. So that there had to be another way for me to stay in the game. So the foundation was really important for me. But as you said, there are tons of people who are abstinent who really aren't emotionally well. And mental health is nuanced. It's not prescriptive, like we know what to do for heart surgery, we know what to do for broken bones. It's none of that. It's nuanced, because it's within the environment, it's within the relationships that all of this gets worked out of who we really are.
Absolutely.
So I'm really aligned with what you're saying. It opened my eyes to see that we still have big battles to fight against bureaucratic and government agencies, because that's probably everywhere. It's not just in America. And
Yes.
so every little bit that we can do will hopefully, please God, make a difference for those who need it.
Yes. And I want to say that I have decided not to fight those battles.
It's probably healthier.
Yeah, I want to be really clear that, and this is really important for me to say, for you guys and for myself, I am not waiting for the government to wake up. I am not waiting for these systems to break down so that new, better systems can arise. And what I am for is the empowerment of the individual. And since we have a thing called podcasting, I'm able to empower myself in this small way and hopefully reach a larger audience and express that, you know, I don't want anybody to be under the care of the American Medical Association. I want you to be under the care of wise, caring, intelligent, experienced people.
Advocate as our own healers, right? Our own best healers.
Yes, yes. And that's not to say that every doctor in the American Medical Association is not those things, but I'm not seeing preventative health care there. I'm not seeing the spiritual aspect of humanity being considered in our healthcare decisions. For someone like me, that's just insane. And so I'm not waiting. I'm not fighting. I'm not against. It's more that I'm for. I'm for these things that we're doing here. And I'm for the things that have made a difference in our community members. And those people are actually really sincerely healing and finding the greatest level of freedom from addiction and on a path of, as we call it, a path of discovery. So I want to thank you, Jeanne, for your inquiry. Look at all that it's brought up. Thank you so much.